Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you guys are doing great. Now, last night I was a little bit triggered about something, and obviously this something has something to do with this video today. And what I noticed was when I was triggered, my OCD started flaring up. Now, I haven't had an attack in quite a while, so when this attack happened, I was kind of thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what is going on? My OCD stems from anxiety. Like, anxiety is the big umbrella, and then under that, I suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder. My flare-ups and my attacks usually happen when I feel out of control. So when I engage in repetitive behavior, compulsive and repetitive behavior, it is a way for me to feel like I have some kind of control over my environment. Now, what this triggering aspect was my husband had talked to me about my working life. Now, I predominantly do YouTube and look after my children. That's what I've kind of done over my whole 20s, really, with a little bit of work experience in my early 20s. During the time of my work experience in the workforce, I had been by many different managers and CEOs, and this had resulted in trauma or perhaps even some kind of post-traumatic stress. I have not had that checked properly, so I can't say. However, as a result, I have been absolutely traumatized by certain things. Back then, when I was really struggling with these people, with these managers, with these CEOs, I never was able to recognize how to take my power back in those moments where I was really suffering. As a sensitive person, as a highly sensitive person, as an empath, as an INFP, there are certain things about me and my sensitivities which make it really easy for others to take advantage of and walk all over. That's just the simple fact of life. I'd come across articles from our New Zealand journalism talking about how these rates are increasing and amongst the trades community, so that just makes complete sense. Everyone that I've known who works in a trade has undergone some kind of and I'm sure it's like that for many different factions in the workplace. It's something that will never not happen, but it's just how we address it, how we address ourselves, how we address it externally as well. It's all wrapped up with a bow on top. So this video is how to take your power back as a sensitive person. Whether you're an INFP, empath, highly sensitive person, INFJ, it doesn't really matter. If you are a sensitive person in general and you get walked all over by narcissists and other kinds of people, then this video is for you. I hope. In a few videos back, I mentioned making peace with your shadow self and coming to know your shadow self, accepting that shadow self. And this is probably the most important thing that you can do to take your power back, because it's going to be putting you into a place of balance and self-acceptance. Because what's more than a narcissist person wanting than to take the power from you, to make you feel powerless and to make you hate yourself? Because when you hate yourself, when you feel bad about yourself, when you're not accepting of yourself, you wind up being really vulnerable. The thing about narcissists, about bullies, is that they don't have low self-esteem. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They have an inflated sense of self. They think that they are the bee's knees. Let's just put it at that. I think that's a common misconception about bullies, is that we think that they have low self-esteem, but they don't. They think that the world owes them something because they are who they are and they're the best. But we are here today to take our power back so that they don't see a point of vulnerability for them to take advantage of, because they feel that they're entitled to your vulnerability, to your time. So what is your shadow self? Your shadow self is the parts of you that you don't really come to address out in public. It's something that you keep quite hidden. It's the private part of yourself. It's the vulnerable part of yourself. It's the parts where people could quite easily criticize if they come to know it. So it's something that you only share with close people or maybe nobody. It's your deep dark secrets. These could be aspects which you consider your inherent weaknesses. As a sensitive person, we feel sensitive at pretty much anything. Something that can emotionally trigger us, that can physically, mentally, spiritually trigger us and bring us into a negative state of being, that is the shadow self. The thing about the shadow self is that it's never going to disappear. It's part of who we are. As human beings, we are not perfect, nor should we ever aim to be perfect. What we should be aiming to be is better than what we were yesterday, to compare who we were yesterday to who we are today, and take the things that we've learned from yesterday in order to better ourselves and to create a more positive path. These light and dark aspects of ourselves are what balances who we are. It's the yin and the yang to ourselves. Because if we know ourselves the most, if we've made peace with these vulnerable aspects of ourselves, that makes us the ones who have the power over who we are. No one will be able to infiltrate it because you've already owned it. If you're sensitive and someone is trying to make fun of the fact that you're sensitive, it's like, cool dude, I know I'm sensitive. And our shadow aspects don't mean that we can make excuses for us being. And I'm not meaning that the sensitivities are but some kinds of behavior that we may exhibit. The things that happen in our lives, the triggering moments, the parts of our lives that make us angry, it's only a reflection of the things that we need to be addressing in ourselves. So if these managers or these people who are bullying you, or you feel vulnerable around these people, if they're making you feel negative about yourself, it's a very good opportunity to address the parts of yourself that you need to address to move forward with your life. It's important to realize what we have control over versus what we don't have control over. Now, what we have control over is ourselves. It's how we react to things. Yes, we may have these feelings that come up and they may be a surprise. We may not expect them, and they come in and they're overwhelming and they make us just want to scream and shout and fall into a heap on the floor. I don't know if that happens to you, but that's happened to me. So our feelings, when they come in, yes, that's something that just happens, but it's how we respond to those feelings and what we do with those feelings which makes the biggest difference. We cannot control what goes on in our environments. We cannot control what other people do and how other situations outside of ourselves take place, how they take place. What we can control is how we respond to what is happening on the outside. We are the ones who need to take responsibility for that, because once we feel like a victim in a situation, and we most likely could actually be a victim, but when we feel that way, when we feel like a victim, when we feel like other people have the power and control over us, that gives them exactly that, the power and control. Once we empower ourselves and say, you know what, you're actually not going to have that power over me anymore because I'm going to change how I respond. That is where you are taking that power from them and giving it back to you. Now, I know this is so much easier said than done, and trust me, I've been in these situations where it's like, well, how the heck, as a victim, how are you supposed to take that power back from them? And I've lay awake all night long, not wanting to go back to work the next day because I was so afraid of the continued from these people. I had fallen into alcoholism to try and deal with these negative feelings that I was having because I had no idea how to get myself help or how to get myself out of these situations. So I know all too well what it feels like to feel like a victim and to be that victim. I totally get it. It's perfectly fine to address the fact that you've had these traumas, that you have been a victim, that in your life have what has almost felt like they've ruined your chances of ever living a normal life. And I can totally relate to that. The problem is that they're not going to address your healing. They're not going to be the ones to come up to you and apologize and say, well, look, I'm going to pay for your therapy. As I said, people aren't going to change because we want them to, but we owe it to ourselves to go and heal those aspects and to work on the things that have shattered. We owe it to ourselves because we are the ones who have our backs. We are the ones that need to show ourselves that love and compassion for ourselves where we have fallen into a state of victimhood, because we are the only ones who can get ourselves out of that. We're the only ones who have control over how we respond to unfavorable situations. And I'm not here to say that that is an easy thing to do, but it's also not easy to feel like a victim and to not give ourselves the compassion. That's not an easy thing to deal with either. Once we take responsibility for our healing, for our self-love, for our compassion, we take our power back. Those other people in the situation will lose that power and that control over you. How many times do you look in the mirror and notice the things about yourselves that you really like? I haven't done that in such a long time. And in society, we are often faced with the things that we deem that we're bad at. And little do we hear the things about us that are actually really good, these strengths that we have, which we all have. When I was working under this manager, she pretty much every single day could so easily point out my quote-unquote flaws and never really celebrated or acknowledged the parts of me that were actually really good and where I could help the company. And trust me, I had some really good aspects to myself because I'm incredibly creative and innovative. But this woman managed to find a way every time that I personally had a win. She found a way to take that from me. And instead of praising that win that I may have had, she would have found other aspects that she could bring down. Unfortunately for her though, I still had those good aspects of myself. Whether she liked them or hated them, they were still there. And while she wasn't going to change her ways and tell me how great I was in certain aspects, that's something that I could absolutely do and what I could have control over. It's important that while we focus on these shadow parts of ourselves, that we also focus on the really amazing things about ourselves that make up who we are. Because we couldn't have the light without the darkness, and we couldn't have the darkness without the light. So there is absolutely something amazing about you that you need to start recognizing. If you're terrible at all these bunch of things, you could write me a list. There has to be a list equal to that's good about you. It's all about the yin and the yang, remember. And as a sensitive, empathetic, compassionate kind of person, I bet that list is absolutely massive, and you need to take a good look at yourself and realize these really amazing things about you. Once you start recognizing your strengths and start honing in on those strengths, start making the strengths the main thing that you put out there in the world. Once you start thinking more positively about who you are, that's what you're going to be leading with. That's going to be your leading energy and what's going to come back to you tenfold. So what I want you to do right now is pull up the comment sections and make a list of 5. And then next to those 5 separate bullet points, write the things about yourself that you love, that you feel are helpful for not only you, but your communities. Now, last really important aspect to tie this all off, to seal it all up, is to be able to place your boundaries, to know what your boundaries are. Now, boundaries aren't a brick wall. They aren't a way to keep people out. They're not a way to block people. It is, however, a way for you to say, this is where my energy starts and this is where it ends. And where it ends is something that you cannot cross. And if you try to cross it, well, I'm going to be taking myself away from this situation and conserving the energy. Boundaries are incredibly important, and it's a difficult thing to establish because once you know what they are, which is quite easy to know because we can think about the things that we like and what we don't like, but putting those things into practice, it's harder than what it sounds. If we don't say yes authentically, we say yes resentfully, and that leads to far more problems than if we'd said no in the first place. Now, isn't that an interesting factor? Because without these boundaries that we place up, we are only really in turn going to be hurting ourselves. Boundaries aren't just a way for you to be able to limit people's involvement into your energy, but it's also a way for you to, in a way, preserve your future prospects when it comes to how you regulate your energy and where you put that energy. If you say yes resentfully to things, not only is that going to hurt people in the future, but it's also going to hurt you. We feel that we have to say yes to so many things and let people in and give to people, because otherwise we're going to be a bad person. People are going to look at us unfavorably. People are going to think that we are standoffish. But really what this means is that we are putting ourselves first in the situation so that we can later give to others and give authentically. My dad, Grandfather Whitebear, he will refer to this as, does it grow your corn? If it doesn't grow your corn, don't do it. If it does grow your corn, do it, invite it in. And I think that's a really fabulous way of looking at it. When I've had trouble in the past, I would often go to him for advice and he would say, does it grow your corn? Simple as that. And I think back and I'm like, wait a second. No, it doesn't grow my corn. And that's really helped me to be able to figure out what I really want in my life and what I don't. Unfortunately, we sensitive people can become people pleasers. And we do this for social approval. We do this to fit into the pack so that we're not rejected. It is a survival mechanism and it can absolutely be a trauma response. You deserve to lift yourself out of this situation, to place those boundaries down, and to be able to say no to the things that do not grow your corn. So anyway, you guys, that about wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give me some requests. I have been a little bit in and out of YouTube recently, and it's just because I'm on a new path, obviously going to keep doing YouTube, but I'm also planning on getting a beehive, and I'm going to start that as a little hobby project. I've also started my own organic veggie garden, and I want to keep adding to it and make it quite prosperous and large, and to be able to give some of these veggies away, to give some honey away. So I don't know, perhaps I could document my new hobby on YouTube, maybe make a second YouTube channel. What do you think? Let me know. So anyway, I hope you guys have a really good day, night, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you guys all again for the next video. Bye.